Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another daily devotion. This devotion I am recording for August 3rd of 2022. We are working our way through the Gospel of Matthew. We are in the 24th chapter, and we are in what is known as the Mount Olivet Discourse. This is the last teaching of Christ in Matthew's Gospel. This is the Holy Week. He's getting ever closer to his date with fate and the cross and all of that, and the resurrection. Forget that part. Well, so this is Matthew 24, 9 to 14 we're dealing with. Yesterday, he just got into this Mount Olivet discourse talking about the signs of the end time. And remember that we walked away from that, or at least I walked away from that, with the main part, see that you are not alarmed, and for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Remember that part. You just don't get alarmed. The world's crazy now. Let's not get so shook up. It's not easy to do. I can fall for that as well as, or more than maybe most. We can get worried about it. We see the world becoming more and more crazy, at least from our small snippet of life. We have to remember that there's been some really crazy times in the world. You look at the monks in England and the Vikings coming and tearing down and the pillaging and all of the rest of the stuff that they did with the monasteries and all of that. I mean, it was horrifying. The bloodshed and the pillaging and all of it. It was horrifying. Certainly they would have thought that the world was coming to an end in some of those different things. Same way with World War One, Two, what have you. Maybe more so World War One. If you were in the trenches in World War One, what a horrifying thing. You would certainly think that the world had fallen apart completely at the seams. But with that, let's look at 9 to 14 in chapter 24 and talk about that a little bit more. Then they will hand you over to be tortured and will be put you to death. Excuse me. Then they will hand you over to be tortured and will put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Then many will fall away, and they will betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of the increase of lawlessness, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved, and this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. Okay. What Jesus is telling us here is that we're going to have some tough times. We're going to have some really difficult times. You're going to be handed over and tortured, and you will be put to death. Now think about the church in Rome, and the Romans up against the church before the church was adopted as the part of the Roman culture. The people were horrifyingly tortured. At the Council of Nicaea, the bishops and whatnot that showed up, most of them were disfigured and maimed from having been tortured. And here they are now all of a sudden sitting there and being welcomed. It was certainly a surreal thing for them. And up until that time, they were in fear for their life. So think about that when we're looking at and look at the church today in different parts of the world. Here in the U.S., we don't have this issue. We don't really have to worry about being tortured, nor certainly put to death because of our beliefs. But we are hated by many because of their falling away. They fall away. Then many will fall away, and that number many is a big many. Let's put it that way. It's not most, but it's a big portion. And they will betray one another, turn on one another. The church turn on one another. Who would ever thought of that? Who would ever think we see that? And hate one another. We can see some crazy stuff in the church. And because of that behavior, that drives people away from the church because they look at us as hypocrites. And they say, oh, these guys can't get along among themselves. Why do I want to be involved with that? We end up being stumbling blocks for many because of our behavior. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. I kind of touched on that yesterday. That's one of my big things that I think an awful lot of folks, and it happened here at Woodlawn years ago. We had a preacher that came in and caused the church to divide. Many of these guys that come around, or girls that come around, guys and gals, that come with these ideas and they start preaching these end time things and giving specific dates, things like that, thinking that they're much more clever by half than anybody else, and they've somehow discerned things out of Scripture. They've tied together these unrelated, perhaps many times, pieces of script, threads of Scripture, and they've come up with this, again, too clever by half, maybe more than half, maybe about 90, 3 times too clever, 1,000 times too clever. And what happens is when that stuff falls completely on their face, or what happens when they present that to some people that don't buy into it, those people that don't buy into it leave the church. That happened here. There were people left the church because of that. They didn't buy into that, and they wanted nothing to do with it, and they've never come back to being involved in church. It's happened many places. It's happened also that when that so-called prophet and his date doesn't come to pass. In my life, there's many, many, many dates have been proposed, and thus far, Jesus has not appeared on the dates that anybody picked. Hasn't happened yet. Someday he'll show up again. That we know. We just don't know when. Only the Father knows. And I think that you are very, very much being disobedient when you think that you should know, that you are so privileged as to be the one person besides the Father that knows, and you're going to tell everybody. To me, that's very disobedient. That's very disrespectful to God. Jesus told us only the Father knows. I'm not going to try to know. I'm just going to obey. And I think that's what the key is to do. Because of those prophets, many are led astray and many fall away. And we have seen that, and we will continue to see that. Because of the increase of lawlessness, and that word lawlessness can be disobedience or sin, the love of many will grow cold because of the way the world is, but also is it because of our sin of us disagreeing with one another, of getting in each other's faces, of trying to discern things that we are not supposed to try to discern, and we end up we are disobedient. I just said that was disobedient to God. The love of many will grow cold. There's no greater sin than driving someone away from God. I hope I'm not. I never do that. I hope that I'm not part of that. If I am, God help me. And so that's one of the greatest sins I think the one can have. But the one that endures to the end will be saved. We have to endure all these things. We're going to have trouble. There's going to be trouble. We're going to have difficulties. This is not a rose garden, as the song meant. But the good news is that the kingdom, once the kingdom is proclaimed to all the world, this is a foreshadowing of the great commandment in Matthew. There's coming soon. We are to take the word to all the earth. And once we've done that, at that time, then the end will come. We haven't done that yet, guys and gals. There's places in the world that have still not learned the love of Christ, where it has not been shared. That doesn't mean that we get, I don't want to say violent or pushy about that. In God's time, His time, we will be allowed that avenue to go to those last few pockets that have not been proselytized to yet. And all knees will bow to God, to Christ. So I think that's what I've got for each day. We're about 8.5, or almost 9 minutes, excuse me. We're continuing on with the Mount Olivet Discourse tomorrow. Actually, I think we go all the way to Friday. I don't think we'll get out of it until Friday. Yeah, we're going to be at it for a while. So with that, we'll be next week, actually. Excuse me for that, because we got to get to the next chapter yet. So with that, I'm going to let you go for today. Please, please, please be a blessing to someone today, and have a blessed day yourself as well. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye. God bless.